dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome, one and all, to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network, from our flagship station, WWRC, in the nation's capital. I'm your host, Michele White. Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. And I'm joined now by our economics editor at Liberty Nation News, Andrew Moran. Andrew, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've written two very fascinating articles about loneliness, the cost demographically and the cost economically. Share with our viewers a little bit about what you told us in those stories.
Yeah, so the first story actually is part of a broader story that stems from a paper published in August 2024 that determined that loneliness is a $460 billion hit to the U.S. economy through absenteeism. This means people are not showing up to work, and this has an effect, a wide array of effect on things like productivity, and that hurts the overall economy. And then you dive deeper into the other challenges of that loneliness affects the economy, and it makes sense too from a philosophical standpoint. If I'm a 35-year-old person, well, I'm 37, but 35-year-old person, you're alone. You have no family, you have no spouse, you have nothing. And, what's the point of going to work? What's the point of waking up at 6 a.m., going on a 2-hour commute, working a job you dislike, and then go back home and go another 2-hour commute? So it makes sense of why people, a 35-year-old individual wouldn't show up to work without any meaning or purpose. I guess that's more of an existential question that, if you're alone, is there really any meaning to life?
So that is the existential question. Where's the inspiration? But there's more than that. Talk about how this also affects the demographics.
Yeah, so you see this not only in the United States, but all over the world, where people are not getting married, people are not having children. People, I saw a number recently. I said that the number of people reporting zero friends is at an all-time high in the United States. So this is having a wider consequence for the broader society. In a separate article I wrote, I talked one of the facets or consequences of this loneliness epidemic, which is actually a thing. People call it a public health crisis, or health experts call it public health crisis. And one of the consequences is the death of the cousin. That sounds like a Leo Tolstoy story, but this is true. This you see this in the data for the last few years, and this is what these health experts have been talking about. Where if people even if a man and a woman get together and they have a kid, that's just one child. But back in the day, people would have 2, 3, or 4 kids, and you have a growth of cousins. But now you're seeing an absolute decline it's becoming it's eventually going to become a foreign concept to a lot of people not having a cousin. And, if from a personal standpoint, my kids, they go to school and you go on the school bus and it's just a majority of you have about 100 kids and a majority of it is just singleton. And, people are not going to know what was like having a cousin in the future.
Or a full family of aunts and uncles and grandparents that they may not have a relationship with. What does that do to the family, and what does that do to a generation?
Well, just from the grandparent standpoint, grandparents contribute a lot to a child's development. It even helps their own kids too, because childcare is one of the biggest costs that families incur nowadays. But even the idea of a grandparent is slowly fading away because a lot of people are having children later in their lives. So even if a child was born, he may have only a few years with a grandparent. And that's sad too, because, I personally I didn't grow up with grandparents. Maybe that's why I am the way I am, which is not a good thing. Overall, the grandparents, just like the cousin, that's eventually going to slowly fade away from our society.
Maybe that's why you were so interested in this story. There are a couple of stories that made national headlines that touch on what you're talking about. One was that grandparents who babysit their children have sharper minds. It tends to stave off any kind of mental decline. And then there were 2 birth stories that were also surprising. South Korea has just enjoyed, for lack of a better word, they really have enjoyed a burst in births since they're calling it the post-COVID marriages, and they have a 6.2%, little over 6% burst in births. And they were one of the lowest. And the United States, by contrast, suffered a 0.12% decline in births last year. So talk about how interesting that dichotomy is and then what governments are doing to help.
Well, I mean, that is fascinating because for so many years, South Korea had one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, and they have, an aging population. So, I mean, I saw this one chart years ago, and it was the numbers were showing how there was such a high population of old people and a low population of young people. So that's a positive sign for the South Korea, not just on a societal wise, but also economically. For the United States, I mean, you look at some of the survey data, and you see why people are not having kids. One of them is the cost of living. Cost of living is sky high. We talked about this earlier, daycare. I mean, that's such a huge expense. Healthcare costs, that's another thing. Food, diapers, just everything is becoming increasingly expensive. I think the other aspect too is that a lot of people don't want to have the responsibility of having children. It's a lot of work, a lot of stress. A lot of people are comfortable in their lives, just going to work, going home, watching Netflix, being on their phones, not having to deal with temper tantrums and soiled diapers and children. On a broader scale, of governments, I mean, I wrote an article months ago talking about one of the biggest consequences or the worst myths that politicians ever made was talking about overpopulation. And how we're seeing the consequences of that. Or just talking about the fiscal side of it, where you need to populate a higher population to sustain all these national social programs,
right?
Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, governments are trying to reverse this by fostering child rearing. Hungary, I think, is one of the most famous examples of it, where they want to eliminate the income tax for women who have 3 or 4 kids. They want to. Other governments are providing stipends. Up here in Canada, they call it a baby bonus, where you get a few $100s a month for every child you have up to the age of 6, and then you have a lower price or lower payments up until they're 18. So all these governments worldwide are doing these things, but they're not seeing the fruits of these efforts. So no matter what they're doing, it's not encouraging people to have children. South Korea, for now, it seems to be the exception, but overall, young people are not giving it.
What do you think is behind that? Do you think there's a mental change that people need to? How do you reverse their thinking that this is bad for the planet and good for humanity? Because it's not just the social programs you were discussing. It's turning on the lights in the government. It's paving the roads. Any source of income to keep society going is going to dwindle with the population. How do we turn the mindset of young people that having babies and children are a blessing, a good thing, not only for them, but for society?
That's a $64,000 question that I can't answer. I mean, if I had the answer to that, I would, maybe I'd be hired by some government. But I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, because there's so many factors to it. I mean, when people go on social media and they see these people who are, who they call them dinks, double income, no kids, or they see, individuals who are by themselves with nice high income, and they're traveling the world, and they're going to Spain, they're going to Italy, they're going to Germany, and they're having the time of their lives. But someone who's at home on their sofa reading this in social media, they're saying, "Oh, how I can't do this because I have a kid, or if I had a kid, I won't be able to do these things." So I mean, it's very hard to change people's minds. Perhaps over time it will. I mean, you see some of the numbers now. I mean, a lot of conservatives, they're the ones having children, and a lot of left-leaning individuals, they're not having kids. So I mean, perhaps over time, that whole idea of family and a nuclear family and child rearing will increase.
Charlie Kirk had that message. He was really driving that home before he was assassinated about how important it was to get married and have kids. You live longer, you live happier, and it's good for not only you, but not only for society, but for you as a person. So he really had a big audience with that. And they played, I don't know if you watched the All-American halftime show on Sunday, they played that clip of him at the end talking about how the greatest thing you could do is to get married and have children. And
see the same thing about dogs, you have dogs, better for your advisors.
Well, we talked about the psychological benefits. We talked about the societal benefits, but also what about dying alone? If you don't have kids, you have this lifestyle and you live 80 years. And as I said earlier, grandparents who grandparent their children or babysit, take care of their children while their kids work have sharper minds, no matter what they're doing. So if you reverse that and someone's 80 years old, hasn't had kids, traveled the world, had a career, they have no one to babysit, and they have no interaction with young people, what does that do to their brains?
Oh, that's absolutely horrible. I've seen some of the research on this and how loneliness is so detrimental to your brain. I mean, of course, I love being by myself a lot of the time. I love reading books. I love listening to classical music and all that stuff. But over time, the cumulative effect of that loneliness is just horrible for your brain. One research I saw recently, and it showed that the monotony of life can really deteriorate your brain of the loop where you wake up, brush your teeth, eat lunch, go to work, go to bed. If you do that by yourself as an old person, that can really weigh on your health physically, mentally, perhaps in your case spiritually. So there are many negative or adverse effects of being alone. And there was just one study I heard on the radio recently that said that older people who have dogs, and they go out, they exercise, they go for walks, they get sunshine, that increases their health. So I can only imagine the positive health effects of being an old person who has grandkids or even great grandkids.
Right. I loved going over to my grandmother's house after school, and and I just loved talking to her. And my mom lives far away, so it's hard. It's hard on both sides. But for people that don't even have that, I can't even imagine. So what about Trump's Trump accounts? So he started this Trump account for babies born between 2025 and 2028. Talk about what you think that's going to do for parents or would-be parents and for the economy.
Well, for would-be parents, that's a nice little nest egg that you're putting for your child, because over time, because the Treasury Department, when they were promoting the Trump account, they concluded that if you just put $1,000 deposit into the account, never touch it, never contribute to it, never withdraw from it, then perhaps that would grow to as much as $500,000 by the time you reach the age of 60. Of course, that's barring any inflation. But overall, that's still pretty good compared to the average person nowadays who has the average retiree, I think, has about $100,000 sitting in their account. So that would be a handsome windfall. But whether that encourages people to take that step to have family, that I highly doubt the $1,000 is going to change anyone's minds. But overall, that's a positive effect for parents today, and it's a boon for the broader economy. I saw this. I love criticisms that I've read over this proposal, the program, I should say, excuse me, is that it's a handout to Wall Street. Consider this: the estimated price tag for this program is about $15 billion. Daily transactions on Wall Street is around $400 billion. Wow, $15 billion price tag. I think in the grand scheme of things for the Wall Street.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.